Hello everybody, it's Peter with an I, S-T-A-W-A-R-T.
And welcome to segment 43 of...
I don't know, the Dark Tower, I guess?
While they were doing the Monster Mash, which was a graveyard smash, the dentist stepped around the corner. It was something completely unexpected, like Mom walking in when you're dreaming about ponies and circus clowns. The dentist stood there with his earphones on, face to face with three hideous demons. Three hideous demons are about the worst surprise a person can suffer when they're alone at night. Earlier on, Potty Mouth and Frank experienced one hideous demon, and that was enough. All four of them in the office shrieked with fright. They all screamed and screamed at the top of their lungs. The three monsters ran off, even though the dentist was in the grips of shell shock and temporarily disabled. Frank made the hair-trigger decision to split off and take the stairs, so if anyone got caught, they wouldn't all go down. "Wait," said Joe. Frank was too far gone to hear him. "Let's take the elevator." The elevator was already at the top, so they didn't have to wait for it. Joe went to push the close button, and a shrill alarm started sounding off. The elevator doors rested for a long moment before they slowly closed. "Can you turn that off?" yelled Nancy over the racket. "No," said Joe, looking at the panel. "Which button did you press?" she hollered. "What?" he asked. "Which button did you press, she repeated through the mask. "That red one," he pointed at the emergency alarm button. Nancy pressed it again and it went off. They were a little less nervous than before the alarm button had been pressed, because before it had been pressed, they at least had a chance to escape. But now that the whole building was alerted, they didn't have to worry about that anymore. It sort of took the pressure off, knowing for sure they were doomed. It was like they didn't have to take the SATs. Joe started to take off his mask. After all, if the security guards didn't see him on their monitors, they would see him in the lobby when the elevator stopped and they took him into custody. Or, if security guard Lewis was on duty, the rubber mask would keep the remains of his head from exploding all over the walls. "Wait," said Nancy with a plan. She arbitrarily picked a button and laid her finger on the polished number. But before she actually pressed it in, it lit up as if it were touch-sensitive. "That was weird," she said. "What?" asked Joe. "Nothing," she replied. The elevator stopped, and after a swish, fluorescent light spilled onto the carpet from the floor they landed on. Nancy instructed Joe to help her hold the doors open. She used her thumb and forefinger and ran them down the two columns of circular button heads. Her goal was to activate every button between the top floor and their own, thereby tying up the elevator system as it stopped at each number, opened the doors, waited for a passenger, and slowly closed again. She raced her fingers down the panel again, but only the top two buttons lit up. She quickly discovered that only 3 buttons can be lit up at one time. To keep Smart Alex from pressing every button and stepping out, all she managed to do was to send the elevator up to the top floor, where the dentist had gathered his wits, talked to the security guard at the bottom floor, and concluded the infiltrators were wearing masks. While Nancy and Joe ran out onto floor number 36, the dentist was upstairs testing out the batteries for his electrode paddles. He waited for the elevator to ding at his floor, the top floor. Any normal person would have been freaked out by the idea they came face to face with intruders, and would have called the police without hesitation. But the dentist was no longer his own man. He had become possessed by the image of his tooth-covered palace, his Xanadu, which called to him from the netherworld like a demon lover. He would sacrifice his body much like the ice-breaking breast of a boat as it beat against the churning, abrasive sea to bring its ship across the icy, dark oceans to the port of being. The icebreaker may believe it's the one pulling the massive hull of destiny, when in fact, it's being pushed. The doors slowly came to a close as the dentist ran to stop them. The rubber seals rested together, but soon parted again when the dentist pushed one of the buttons on the override panel he used to stop the trespassers on floor number 36. He would have brought them right back to the top floor, but the override controls don't prevent the doors from opening and allowing the passengers to escape. He positioned a nearby chair to keep the doors open while he fetched his weapon, his battery pack and paddle. Not only was he going to stop the infiltrators and question them about the whereabouts of the missing mosaic tile of teeth, he planned to add to his collection. Chapter 40. As the elevator doors came to a close, the dentist heard a yelp. He wondered if there was something wrong with the elevator system, but no, it was Frank. In an attempt to race down the stairs quicker, he tried sitting on and sliding down the handrails. In his rush, he haphazardly jumped on to sit on the stainless steel rail and fell straight backwards off the edge. It happened as naturally as sitting down on a chair whose back legs were secretly sawed in half, and then falling some 60 floors. The funny thing is, Frank didn't even need to save time by sliding down the handrails. He could have moseyed on down the flights as slow as a tortoise, stopped to eat a sandwich, cleaned up the crumbs, napped for a while, and strolled on out through the front doors playing kick the can. This fact really didn't occur to him as he sailed downward, twisting and turning head over heels as he screamed like an ambulance siren. He covered about 10 floors a second. Through the whistling eye holes of his latex mask, the numbered signs indicating the floors started to look like a kid's book, one in which the cartoon is slightly different on each page, so when the pages are flipped rapidly, the character appears to move. Unlike cartoon kids' books, the final chapter of this fun book was gonna splatter his guts everywhere, popping him on the floor like a can of spaghetti sauce that was taped onto the business end of a shotgun. If kids' flip books did end that way, they wouldn't sell very well.
No babies were shot, blended, or barbecued during this presentation.
Frank couldn't tell if he was fully conscious when the lights began to dim. He didn't know if the lights were low on the bottom levels, or if it was just a trick of his neurons, as his mind laid around on the floor like a kid's jumping rope. His body crashed onto a gurney. The mechanical bed didn't have any springs, but the force of the impact was so intense, he bounced a few feet back into the air before coming to a rest on the lime green mat, whose strong synthetic stitches were ripped and frayed by the intensity of the collision. The old coroner waddled out from the back room, approached Frank, and looked at him through the bottle-cap glasses. He looked down each of the hallways. He tried to remember if he actually heard the crash or not. He tried to think of a reason why there would be a crash. There wouldn't. So there must not have been one. There was no tag on Frank's toe. In fact, his shoes and clothes were still on. It was obvious to the night shift coroner that this was just another case of the doctors and medics bringing down deceased patients and then sneaking off so they didn't have to do any paperwork. The coroner didn't realize Frank was wearing a latex mask, and assumed that he was a burn victim.